Alright, so I'm gonna make a video on how to make a three-prong fish spear. This is a bigger one that I made using wax nylon and some pine pitch. But this is the configuration. This is obviously for larger fish. And then I have a smaller configuration using buckthorn, using its thorn for the barbs, I should say, and then stinging nettle, cordage here, some pine pitch here to put everything together, and then I've got it hafted onto a shaft with a bit of cordage here that's stinging nettle, and that fits all together so that when you do get something like a fish, it'll wriggle and it won't work itself off of the barbs. And if it does come off or work itself off, then it's only fighting against the string versus the whole device. You don't have to do that. It could be one solid piece, but I decided to go one step further. It's a bit of a process, but just to show you kind of how that could be done. Alright, so again, for this project here, I've made this particular three-prong fish spear so that it slides into it's hafted into a secondary piece here. So it's one solid piece like that. And I can throw it like a spear, or I can make a Hawaiian sling. We'll see if we can get something with this, and then I'll do the Hawaiian sling thing, perhaps. But I went on ahead and straightened the shaft that was a little bent, using just some heat, using flame, and you can straighten it up. This is a green piece, so I cut it green. It's still alive. It may warp as it dries, it may crack, but this is just something that can be done quick and dirty in the field. And again, I'm using nettle cordage here, and I thigh rolled it, so it looks like it's coming apart, but it's pretty sturdy on there. Here's a larger example that shows kind of more of a close-up of how things are done for obviously larger fish or prey or whatever, quarry. And then I'm using I'm just using what do you call it, wax nylon as cordage to wrap everything and hold everything together. I'm using also pine pitch here for the barbs to do the same thing, and then wrapping it with the wax nylon. And then I've added a tongue here, so it would be on a spear tip possibly, and which is the same as this, but just a larger unit. So you just do it to scale based on what you're going after. Other thing is, again, basically you'll need, just a Y-shaped piece of wood, hopefully and idealistically not too wide apart, like this one here, not too wide apart. You want it kind of closer together. But this is a piece of buckthorn that could be used for a second project or slingshot or whatever. So you just need a Y piece like this, and then a straight piece to put in the middle. You could use one single piece and split everything out and carve everything to make a single unit. A little bit more time consuming. I figure it's better just to use a piece that's already Y-shaped. Now, that being said, here is a piece of willow, and this is the very tip of it as the branches start to sprout out. But when I look at this, I see a three-prong fish spear in here, and I'm going to release that and show that to you right quick, right? So you can just take what's already in nature, and you don't have to really fashion too much, because that doesn't make much sense, and it's time consuming, energy consuming, etc., etc. So I'm using my cutting tool to take out the pieces that I don't want. And now I essentially have a 3-pronged fish spear. I just gotta fashion it as such. I just gotta put some barbs in it, make the points sharp. I don't need no sinew. I don't need any pine pitch. I don't need any cordage. It's already ready to go, as long as I can shape these in a way to where they'll get something. All right. So keep in mind, there's a lot of shapes and forms in nature that you can make use already. Doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs to work. That you can make use. When you have unoptimal material is when you do have to start to fashion things and bend things to your will, so to speak. So we'll go ahead and begin. It's a bit of a process, but it's kind of fun. Alright, so here's a piece of buckthorn that I harvested. It's pretty long. I want to make a full spear out of it, and it's cut green, so I didn't season it, meaning I didn't let it dry, and I haven't dried it out yet. But we'll see how it goes. I just want to demonstrate the process. And the focus is the Y part here. Okay, we want the Y part. And it's a little, for this size, it seems to be a little too wide, but we'll see. We'll make it work. I've left some of the thorns on this buckthorn on here, because we're going to make use of those. But you have to be careful when you're picking this. And don't eat the berries. The berries are not edible by humans, so they may look tasty, but they're not. They're not good for you. So I'm going to clean this up a little bit, cut these down to size, and then affix a thorn to one of these, and then walk through the process of finishing it up. So here I'm going to go ahead and use my cutting tool to cut some of the thorns, and they seem to want to fly, which is not good because you don't want to step on these. So I'm just going to hold these down and snip them away. Ordinarily, you would use a splinter of wood or a piece of wood and sharpen it to a point, but why not let's save the work and the effort and the time by using the natural material that the wood provides. Okay, we're essentially just making a trap for our quarry, the fish, to make sure it doesn't, wiggle out the line or get away. A lot of this I could sand down, but in a rustic situation it may not even be that necessary. So, okay, and again, this has a bit of a bend to it. I'm going to straighten that out so it's more straight, because we want that. I'm going to set this aside for now. And then I'm going to go ahead and trim these down as best I can. Oops, be off camera. Alright, so a note about these prongs. On this particular plant, tree, shrub, bush, buckthorn, there seems to be one that's more prominent than the other. And again, you could whittle them the same shape if you want to spend that time and work and energy, but we can still use them as is, as long as they're more or less symmetrical on this plane. Alright? And depending on the species of tree or shrub or bush or whatever, you may want something that's a little bit more closer together, or the size is about the same. Anyhow, what we're going to do is I'm going to cut this at about an angle. I want to cut this at a nice angle. Okay? So I'm taking my cutting tool and I'm just cutting it at an angle like that. I want to be able to match that on the other side eventually. But for now, we've got a little bit of work to do on this side. Alright, so we have one side cut at an angle, and the object to that is to take one of our thorns that have already, pretty much they're sharp and they're made, and attach them at that angle. Okay, so that's kind of the idea. However, we're going to also try to attach this to the main part of the shaft. Alright, so we're going to have to do a little bit of whittling, which nothing wrong with that. We just need to be careful with it before we go any further. I'm trying to get these knots off. And again, if the knots are truly a bother, then what you do is you take an abraider. So if the knots are truly a problem, you can take an abraider, substance or surface, and just work them down. Alright? But the most how do you say, valuable commodity in a survival situation is energy. Especially if you're making tools to get something to eat. You're starving. You're getting to the point where you need to sustain energy. So, you know, working or being able to work as rustic as you can may be something to consider, right? Versus trying to make things look very pretty. As long as they're functional, that's the key, right? So we'll braid these down. And we can do this with all of the knots on here. I don't think we need to do all that work. But you could if you wanted to. So what we need to do is we need to make something that'll hold the spear head in a horizontal fashion. So what we want to do is we want to make a tongue on this surface this way. So I'll use my Spyderco that has a bit of a serration here, or whatever cutting tool you need to have, and just kind of cut into it a bit. Okay, just a bit, because this is a small stick. If it was a larger stick, then we'd do something different. And then from here I can whittle out and push out the mass of the twig that I don't need or want, and I can kind of gouge in as deeply as I need, and going to that base I can kind of push out or shape the tongue that I need. Okay, so I'm going to do that on both this side and the exact opposite side. I don't want to cut it in half, but I do need to shape this. Okay, I'm sawing in, and then just going gently towards the groove or notch that I'm making. Okay, to make it nice and square. And flat. And there'll be some more shaping to come, but for now, especially while the wood is still sort of green, this helps. Okay, we'll leave it at that, but this is kind of what we want, this sort of like surface and tongue sort of configuration. Okay, and it helps that we have the knots here, because it gives us a stopping point. You want to be careful when going against or going towards your hand, because I could slip and, you know, have a possible mechanical injury or cut myself. Right? So just go low and slow, or a braid, which would help as well, because I could very well take this and just kind of a braid to finish up or to solidify the shaping that I need. Okay, so but we're not there yet. We're not there yet by a long shot. So furthermore, we're going to continue to refine this by going on the other side of the notch here, and we're going to cut a groove in. All right, and again, we're going to use the serration of this type of blade that I have, and you can kind of take this all the way around the shaft of the stick. Okay. Idealistically, you don't have to, but idealistically you could do that, because what we want to do is we want to create a notch or a groove that will hold a tether, a line of cordage that will be connected to the shaft, so we don't lose our quarry, our fish. Okay? Because the fish will wiggle and it'll work itself. It can work itself off of your shaft if it's stationary, and so you make it so it just sticks on there, you know, and maybe what happens is it ends up working itself deeper, and then you're able to pull it out versus it working itself completely off of a stiff shaft. So we're going to create a groove here, and it doesn't have to be very deep, but just something that's going to hold your cordage. Okay, so I think we have a groove that may be deep enough. I could kind of refine this a little bit, but we'll attach a groove to this, and then therefore our fishing tip will just kind of wiggle off, but we won't lose our head nor the fish, right? Or frog or whatever else you're after. Okay, so this is going to be our long shaft that this will be attached to. So what we need to do is cut a groove in here that this will accommodate and fit. And we may have to cut some length down so it's a little bit thicker and bigger, which is fine. I overcut this, not a big deal. So essentially take a cutting tool, snap it off. This may become useful, so always keep your bits for a locking mechanism or anything like that, you know, another piece of wood. So you never know. So what we want is we want this to fit in here like so, right? And do we have enough purchase? Do we have enough wood? If we have to go down deeper, that's fine, because we want to make sure we have enough purchase. And I think I'll do one more cut, and this should be just about right, more or less. Yeah, it's going to be just about right, so we can make enough purchase. Okay, so I'm going to set this aside until we're ready to use it. And for this piece here now, what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to take my cutting tool and drill a hole on both sides, pretty much as deep as I need it to be for our lip, our tongue, and knock out the wood from there, and just make it enough so this will squeeze up in here nicely, a nice fit. So it could be a bit of trial and error, a bit of work, but it's very, very possible. All right, you just gotta take your time. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this surface here, and I'm just going to go in, because I can always cut it down, but I'm going to go in perpendicular and kind of just start to drill a hole with my cutting tool like this. It's nice and round. Okay. And I want to do this on the other side, exactly perpendicular. So I'm gonna need to flip this over and get it as close as possible. You can always check it, because sometimes what I'll do is I'll take this and then I'll just rotate this around, keeping it as straight as possible, so I have an approximation of about where we're going to meet up. And then I can drill this. Okay, it's the same way as making a notch for your arrowhead and for your notch for making arrows. It's the same principle, and there's a video for that as well. Okay, so we'll just start to work that, but as we work that, I want to start to kind of cut my thin grooves from the top of the hole to the end, and I want it smaller than I think I'll need for our tongue here, because we can always shape it and smooth it, and we want a nice kind of tight fit, to be honest. So we can always take off more, but it's hard to put back more, you know, right? So we can always cut less, it's just hard to put back more. Okay, so we'll just take our time and work this out, but work a hole here as a stopgap for what it is we're trying to do. So essentially something like that. Hopefully that's showing up. We're going to keep working it till we can knock it out. Alright, so I have some loose fiber of nettles here that I can just kind of briefly process. I could use it as is. I just want to break some of the shaft off by rolling it between my hands, and it'll become more pliable, because we just want the fibers, and we want to create a stopper from the split of our shaft. And by doing that, we can create, you know, we can do some common whipping here that'll just be short, but it'll keep it from splitting. And where we drilled our hole here, we're going to start to knock out these pieces here, but we don't want it to split or go further. So we're going to stop that by lashing it. Okay, and you could do a strangle knot or a common whipping or whatever is comfortable. You just want to just keep a binding of your wood. You want to keep a binding of your wood or your shaft together. So I'll just use some whipping real quick, just real quick, like that, just around, and this will stop any splittage going more than we intend. Hold in place for a little bit. This is kind of in the way a little bit, so we can cut that string. And again, we're going to continue working this all the way down. Coming right out. Okay, so for now, like I said, we can always take out more, but we can't add back. I can start to kind of shimmy this in here to see what kind of fit we're going to get or what we need. Okay, now that we're kind of working with this wood here, we still got some ways to go, but we can work it here. We can continue to work on. In a previous video, I've shown you how to notch a arrow shaft. I'm doing it this way instead of originally doing it the traditional way, which would be to cut in and notch and then break it out. And now you have the two pieces that fit together. Only because I'm working with one piece of wood that I went out and harvested today, and I didn't want to make any mistakes in that process, because you can make mistakes and it can break off unpredictably, and now you've got to start from scratch again. So I'm doing it this way to keep from making gross mistakes. Okay, I think we kind of have what we need for the most part in as far as this is concerned. And then this will just fit in here. We can shape this a little bit more so it slides in easier, and we can add some more cordage to the end, which I think I'm gonna do just to be on the safe side. And we are going to be using this stinging nettle cordage that I harvested the other day. So we'll use our braiding surface. Get rid of some of the bark. Again, this is still green wood, which as it dries it may split, just so you know. So I can braid this so that this is more of a wedgy surface. Okay, and as I braid and work it, then I can go ahead and try to fit this in here. Okay, and I can cut some length off of our we'll say male and female part. So this may be the female part that's grabbing it, and the male part is the tongue. Alright, don't mean to be explicit there, yuck, but that's the easiest way to explain it if you can't see it on camera. Okay, and we're doing pretty good here. So what I want is we're going to kind of cut these, and I'm just going to, let's see, eyeball the length that I need to, and because I want a nice snug fit. So I only really need about 1/8 of an inch in this particular measurement, and what I have done to be off of here. Because I have to be careful when I have to work to scale. So now this will fit in here pretty snugly. That'll work. I'm not going to be mad at it. I won't let these dry like that. When this dries eventually, I'm going to keep them separate, and that way it'll always be a snug fit. Okay, but for the most part, we're on a primitive tip. This is what we're looking for. Now I'm going to create another groove here so that we can attach our tether to one groove, tether groove, to another tether groove, and it'll be like, you know, so you have a piece of string that'll look like this. Okay, if that makes sense to you, but you'll see it when it's done. I may not just show the whole process, but because we've already done it here. And then we'll finish off our tip, and we should be good. We should be good to go.